Brother made my life hell, then got my wife pregnant. Now he wants my help after. Our parents cut him off and left me. Me their $2 million inheritance. My younger brother Alex has always had a strange relationship with me. If you think it's because of jealousy, you'd be wrong. He was the golden child of the family, not me. There was no reason for him to feel envious. To give you some context, our mother always doted on Alex. She cooked his meals, did his laundry, and even asked me to help him with his schoolwork. I was expected to assist simply because we were family, but I never got the same consideration in return. I never minded too much. I was always independent. Perhaps it was my fault for always doing things for him without expecting anything back. As the years went on, things took a darker turn. While I was a quiet kid who preferred books and time alone, Alex was loud and boisterous, much like our father. I'm direct and to the point, no sugarcoating, but I think my mom started to see me as difficult or even rude because of it. Alex got all the attention and I got used to it. However, the bullying started when he hit his teens. He would make fun of my height and the fact that I wore glasses. He'd sneak into my room to read my private thoughts, then run straight to our mom to tell on me. When I finally stood up for myself, complaining to our parents about him invading my privacy, they laughed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. It was the start of a long, strained relationship between us. He did even worse things, like nearly breaking my glasses and putting disgusting stuff in my food. He once put small rocks in my cereal, but luckily I spotted them before they could ruin my teeth. When I told Mom, she dismissed it, saying, "This is just how brothers bond." Every time we fought, Alex would target my insecurities, especially since we went to the same school. He knew I was being bullied by some kids, but instead of backing me up, he joined the bullies, calling me names like loser and nerd, even encouraging them to physically hurt me, saying I was a failure. Once, during a pointless argument I can't even recall, Alex told me to kill myself. While I could usually brush off his insults, that one really stung because I was already struggling mentally. I'm better now, but hearing my brother tell me to die was crushing, especially since Dad was always at work and Mom seemed indifferent. She even scolded me once, blaming me for upsetting Alex. Things got even worse in high school. There was this shocking moment when Alex tried to set my hair on fire. Unbelievably, Mom defended him, claiming it was just a prank. Seriously, who does that? Luckily, Dad finally stepped in, telling Alex he had crossed a line and threatening to call the police. It was the first time Alex had ever faced real consequences for his actions. He was stunned, and Dad made it clear that Alex needed to respect me as his older brother. Later, Dad came into my room to talk. I never expected his support because he always told Alex how similar they were, and in some ways, they were. But Dad admitted he'd hoped Alex would mature. But he was seeing that Alex was turning into a bully. Hearing that from Dad was such a relief, and I almost broke down. I told him everything Alex had done to me, including the bullying at school. Dad was shocked and said he'd speak to the principal to make sure the bullies faced consequences. The next day, Dad enrolled me in boxing classes at a local gym, telling me I needed to toughen up and stand up to the bullies in my life. At first, it felt weird, a nerd like me learning to fight, but I committed. I balanced my studies and workouts, and over time, the classes transformed both my body and mindset. One day, Alex pulled his usual tricks again. He stole my allowance, the money I'd saved up from doing extra chores. He took it from my room and was about to ride off with his friends when I caught him. I demanded he give it back, but Alex mocked me, saying the only thing I could do was cry to Dad. Something inside me snapped, and I punched him in the face. He stumbled back, and I grabbed my money from his pocket before pushing him down. Alex started crying, which was honestly kind of funny, but then Mom rushed out to see what happened. When she found out I fought him, she was shocked and scolded me for not being a good role model for Alex, who seemed to take pleasure in seeing me reprimanded. She even told Dad I needed to be controlled. Dad asked us both to explain what happened. I told him how Alex had stolen my money I worked hard for. Alex tried to justify it, saying he needed the cash for a date and that I should help him as his brother. But Dad wasn't having it. He told Alex he was lucky I didn't do worse. I only hit him for stealing because anyone else would have gone straight to the police. I reminded Alex that he had no right to take things from others without their permission. Alex didn't like that and threw a tantrum, hoping Mom would back him up, but Dad stayed firm. When Alex realized he wasn't going to be punished for getting hit, he yelled how much he hated me and ran to his room, locking the door. After that, Alex started distancing himself from me. He finally understood that he couldn't push me around anymore, and that even Dad had stopped supporting his antics. For the first time in years, I felt like we were on equal footing. Though he couldn't physically hurt me anymore, Alex started using words to tear me down whenever our parents weren't around. His behavior worsened with age. He became angrier and more irritable each year. When I tried to talk to him, he would ignore me and walk away, muttering insults like nerd or loser. If he needed to communicate anything, he'd have Mom tell me instead of talking to me directly. When I asked her why Alex wouldn't just talk to me, she would tell me to be more understanding. I couldn't tell if it was just puberty or if he truly hated me. Over time, dealing with his verbal abuse became unbearable, and I yearned to get away from him. I asked Mom repeatedly to mediate a conversation between us to resolve things, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked her why Alex treated me so badly, she would brush me off. Eventually, I left for my dream university on a scholarship. Having been the top student, Dad threw a party for me and even Mom seemed proud. However, Alex remained distant, hardly acknowledging my achievements. The day I left for university was filled with excitement for my future and relief. From the toxic home environment, the first few months at school were liberating. I made new friends, enjoyed my classes, and started building a life separate from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant dread of Alex's verbal assaults lifted, and I found a sense of peace. In my second year, I met my wife Rose at a party, and we instantly clicked. Coming from a conservative background, having children outside of marriage was looked down upon. However, when we found out she was pregnant during our final year, we decided to marry immediately after graduation. Our wedding was simple yet joyful, with both our parents happy for us, and we celebrated together. At that moment, I believed Rose was my soulmate. I had always imagined a monogamous relationship, one woman to come home to and share my life with. Despite other women showing interest over the years, I never acted on it because I was content with Rose. She was my dream, and I never wanted to hurt her. However, I later discovered 2 instances of infidelity in our marriage. One was a long-term affair with her married co-worker, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend. During a visit to her family, some might call me naive, and looking back, I can't fully disagree. Each time we separated, I chose to forgive Rose. I didn't want to raise our child in a broken home and believed we could overcome these challenges. The affair with her co-worker happened when we were young, and I saw it as a mistake, thinking we could move past it. For a while, things seemed to improve. Although I could never fully trust her again, I did my best to push aside my doubts, knowing that if I was going to forgive her, I had to commit to a fresh start. It's been 4 years since her second betrayal, and I believed I had made the right choice. Rose seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning for our future. But 3 months ago, my world was destroyed again, when she confessed to having another long-term affair and suggested that our son might not be mine. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to process the enormity of what she had just confessed. I asked her why she'd kept such a huge secret and how she could have done something so devastating. Her response was cold, as though she were detached from the damage she'd caused. Her vague answers left me with more questions than before. It was a surreal moment, confronting the broken trust and feeling unsure of my own family. I kept pressing Rose for the truth because I needed to know who the father of the child I had been raising was. Eventually, she admitted it was Alex. My heart sank as I asked her to explain, and she told me that she and Alex had become close when I introduced her to my family. She had stayed with us over the holidays, from Thanksgiving to New Year's. Alex, who was usually distant toward me, was warm and kind to her. I was relieved because I didn't want Rose to feel out of place. She wanted to be accepted by my family, so she spent a lot of time with Mom, trying to bond with her. Rose noticed the tension between Alex and me and asked me about it. I explained that our relationship was strained and that it might never be fixed due to unresolved issues. Rose was understanding and tried to include Alex in our plans, hoping it would help us connect. When we'd watch movies, she'd invite Alex to choose what we watched, and we all spent time together. During this period, Alex and I spoke more than we had in years, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Rose told me that one day, Alex opened up to her about a recent breakup, feeling vulnerable. They began a friendship and he would flirt with her when I wasn't around. Eventually, things escalated and Rose couldn't control it anymore. The thought of my wife and brother together made me feel physically sick. Rose admitted she felt guilty afterward and broke things off with him, which explained her sudden decision to leave for New Year's instead of staying with me. I tried to convince her to stay, but she insisted on leaving. When we met again at college, Rose acted normal, so I didn't question it. 2 weeks later, Rose told me she was pregnant. She wasn't sure if the child was mine or Alex's. Without proof, she chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more dependable one. That's why we got married. My world felt like it was falling apart. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked Rose if she had been seeing Alex recently, and she slowly nodded. She confessed they had stayed in touch because of their chemistry. They'd sneak off together, lying to me about working late, and half of her business trips were actually romantic getaways with him. I asked her why she married me if she wanted. Alex and Rose said it was because she didn't want to be the one to end the marriage. She said I was a great father to our son, and that's why she stayed. Rose admitted she made a mistake and didn't know when to stop. I told her I was glad she came clean, but I was going to leave. She began crying, asking for forgiveness and telling me I should fight for her because mistakes happen in marriages. You've not only hurt him, but also destroyed the bonds that held our family together. Your mother and I are partly responsible for what you've become, but this behavior ends now. From this day forward, you're cut off from the college fund I set up for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay for your tuition on your own. I'm also stopping the financial support for your lifestyle. Do you think sleeping with married women makes you more of a man? Let's see how you manage without my money. Through all this, I kept my composure even though I wanted to scream at Alex. Watching my dad punish him was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed Alex's true nature, and it was clear he underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite Alex's protests, kept defending him, but my dad swiftly ended the call, silencing Alex's attempts to explain. Afterward, my mom hugged me. It had been a long time since we shared such a moment, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support. She apologized for not believing me all this time. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my mother. Following this, my dad helped me hire a good lawyer for the divorce from Rose. She and her lawyer tried to play dirty, asking for alimony since I earned more than her, but her affair worked in my favor. We also had a paternity test, confirming that Alex was the father of the child. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than discovering Rose's betrayal. I was furious that the son I had loved wasn't mine, but I chose to stay strong. Rose begged me to keep seeing him, arguing he shouldn't be punished for the situation, but I couldn't bring myself to. He reminded me too much of Alex and I hated it. After the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I moved into my bachelor pad, and it felt surreal to live alone since I had married so young and never really experienced independence. My naturally independent nature allowed me to quickly adapt to my new life, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 weeks ago, my dad called to say he was considering changing his will because he didn't want to leave anything to Alex. My dad is incredibly stubborn, and once he decides to cut someone off, he sticks to it. Alex tried reaching out, showing up at our parents' house, begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mother, who usually gave in to Alex's tantrums, seemed done with him, though it was hardest for her. Alex never texted me to apologize for what he did, showing he didn't regret his actions, just that he was upset about being cut off. My dad said he planned to leave everything to me, ensuring Alex couldn't contest it later. Alex would get only $1. My eyes widened in shock. My dad had worked hard for his assets, retirement fund, and life insurance, totaling nearly $2 million. The only condition was that if my dad passed before my mom, she would continue living in their house. Though ownership would transfer to me, I didn't mind that. I wanted to care for her in her final days. Somehow Alex found out and, unable to reach our parents, called me yesterday trying to make amends. He explained he was struggling with college, and after Rose found out the paternity, she had been pestering him for child support. He said he had no money and was looking for part-time jobs but couldn't find anything. He begged me to talk to our family and start fresh since he needed my help. I laughed in his face and told him I was done with him. I reminded him that he should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. Alex argued I was being unfair and blamed Rose, to which I agreed. I reminded him that I had divorced her, so now she and the child were his responsibility. He shouldn't be calling me to complain about them. Alex raised his voice, but I cut him off, telling him he was no longer the favored son but the black sheep who slept with his brother's wife. Alex began to cry, telling me how everyone, including our grandparents and relatives, had turned against him. While this was true, it no longer mattered to me. I told him we were done, and that he should never call me again. I no longer considered him my brother. Since then, I've replayed the conversation in my head. Despite everything, hearing my brother cry did hurt me a little. I hadn't heard him cry since we were kids, so I guess I'm here to ask if I should talk to our parents about him, or if I'd be wrong not to. Hi everyone. Many of you have been asking why I'm no longer in contact with my son Henry, and some have even called me cruel. I need to explain that I'm not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't a stepson situation. I was led to believe Henry was my son, only to later discover he's actually my brother Alex's. Naturally, this revelation hurt deeply and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want contact with Henry is that I no longer want Rose in my life. If I stay connected to her child, she'll find a way to re-enter my life, and I need space. You may think I'm cruel, but I can't see him again. At least not for a long time. Most of you correctly guessed it was my mother who informed Alex about my dad changing his will, which led Alex to call me as a last resort to fix things. I confronted her in front of my dad and she broke down, saying I had punished Alex enough and that he had learned his lesson. My dad firmly told my mom that if she believed Alex's actions were forgivable, he couldn't stay married to her. He made it clear that if she talked to Alex again, she could pack her bags. This threat silenced her, and my dad, as always, stuck to his guns. It's been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved. My dad and I go golfing every weekend, and he treats me more like a buddy than a son. Although my mother misses Alex, she has stayed away from him. The last I heard, Alex had been asking everyone for money, and eventually dropped out of college because he couldn't afford the fees. He and Rose are living together and raising Henry. I never discuss Alex with my parents, and they don't bring him up either. As for me, I'm doing well. I was promoted 2 months ago, so my salary has increased significantly. I haven't been dating anyone yet as I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that works out.